The Galactic Council chambers stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystalline floor, its domed ceiling displaying a living map of the galaxy where tiny points of light represented the homeworlds of 237 different species. Today, those lights pulsed in synchronized harmony, a visual celebration of the greatest achievement in galactic history. 3,000 years without a single interstellar war. Ambassador Teho adjusted his simple black diplomatic robes and watched as delegates from across known space mingled in groups, their conversations filled with pride and wonder. The Zelthani floated past him, their translucent bodies shimmering with the blue-green hues that indicated deep contentment. A cluster of insectoid thruckery clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter as they shared stories with the towering, plant-like Vedani, whose bark skin rustled with amusement. Remarkable, isn't it? Teho turned to find Counselor Vex. Approaching, the Helix representative stood nearly 3 meters tall, his forearms moving in the flowing gestures that were characteristic of his species. His scaled skin bore the golden patterns that marked him as one of their eldest diplomats. Indeed it is, Counselor Teho replied, his voice carrying the calm, measured tone that had become synonymous with human diplomacy. Though I suspect our ancestors would be quite surprised to see us celebrating the absence of war rather than victory in one. Vextar's large, compound eyes reflected genuine admiration. That is precisely what makes this so extraordinary. When the humans first joined our council, many species feared you. Your historical records spoke of endless conflicts, weapons of terrible destruction, strategies that showed a mind for warfare unlike anything we had encountered. Around them, other delegates had begun to gather, drawn by the conversation. The diminutive Pixari, barely reaching Teho's waist, stood alongside the massive rock-like Goliath whose single eye glowed with interest. Even the ethereal Whispers, beings of pure energy that rarely took solid form, materialized to listen. Yet look what you became, continued Vextar, gesturing to encompass not just Teho but the entire concept of human civilization. The galaxy's premier mediators. When the Rigel Consortium and the Outer Territories nearly went to war over mining rights in the Sigma Quadrant, it was human negotiators who found a solution that satisfied both sides. When the ancient blood feud between the Crimson Fleet and the Steel Brotherhood threatened to reignite, humans showed them how to transform their warrior traditions into competitive sports. A Thrakari delegate clicked forward, her antennae twitching with curiosity. Ambassador Teho, how did your species accomplish such a transformation? Our histories show that your people were exceptionally skilled at warfare. Some of the strategies documented in your archives are studied even now by our military academies as theoretical exercises. Teho's smile was gentle, almost paternal. We simply learned that there are more elegant solutions to most problems. Violence is often the result of miscommunication, fear, or desperation. When you address the root causes, the need for conflict tends to disappear. The assembled delegates murmured their agreement. It was a philosophy that had shaped galactic policy for centuries now. The human doctrine, as it was called, emphasized understanding over conquest, patience over aggression, and cooperation over competition. But surely, pressed a Verdani delegate, his wooden features creaking as he spoke, maintaining such detailed records of your warrior past seems unusual for a peaceful species. Most civilizations who abandon warfare tend to forget those skills entirely. For just a moment, something flickered behind Teho's calm expression. It was so brief that only the most observant delegates might have noticed it, like sunlight reflecting off deep water, revealing glimpses of something vast moving beneath the surface. History teaches us valuable lessons, he replied smoothly. Understanding our past helps us appreciate our present. Besides, those records serve as excellent case studies for what not to do. They remind us why we chose a different path. The conversation was interrupted by the ceremonial chimes that signaled the beginning of the formal commemoration. As delegates moved toward their designated seating areas, Teho took his place at the human delegation table. Around him sat 5 other human representatives, each embodying the quiet dignity that their species had become known for. Dr. Minho, the galaxy's leading expert in interspecies psychology, reviewed his notes for the peace symposium scheduled for the following day. Captain Sujin, commander of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Voice, spoke quietly with her aide about upcoming cultural exchange missions. They were the faces of humanity that the galaxy knew and trusted. Meanwhile, far beyond the gleaming spires of the Council Station, life continued across human space with the same peaceful rhythm it had maintained for millennia. On New Busan, a agricultural colony orbiting a gentle yellow star, Sang-woo knelt among his hydroponic gardens, carefully tending to vegetables that would feed 300 families. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, coaxing life from carefully balanced nutrients and artificial sunlight. His daughter, Yoonji, was home for the harvest season, taking a break from her xenobiology studies at the prestigious Galactic University. She sat nearby, her tablet displaying complex molecular diagrams as she worked on her thesis about symbiotic relationships between different planetary ecosystems. "Father," she said, without looking up from her work, "Professor Kellner says that human agriculture is considered an art form by most species. He thinks it's because we put so much care into understanding what each plant needs to thrive." Sang-woo chuckled softly. "Everything thrives when you understand what it needs. Little star. Plants, people, entire civilizations. The secret isn't forcing growth, it's creating the right conditions and being patient." It was a philosophy that defined not just their farming, but their entire approach to life. Across human colonies, similar scenes played out daily. Teachers patiently worked with students from dozens of different species, learning to adapt their methods to accommodate different ways of thinking and learning. Artists created works that celebrated the diversity of galactic culture, finding beauty in the differences between species rather than trying to eliminate them. Engineers designed technologies that worked in harmony with existing systems rather than replacing them entirely. The galaxy saw this, and called it evolution beyond primitive instincts. They believed humanity had transcended their warlike nature through wisdom and enlightenment. They pointed to human colonies as examples of what civilization could become when it abandoned the old ways of dominance and submission. What they didn't see were the maintenance schedules carefully followed in facilities that appeared to be simple museums. They didn't notice that the historical artifacts in human cultural centers were kept in remarkably good condition for items that were supposedly obsolete. They didn't question why human children still learned about military strategy alongside their lessons in diplomacy and agriculture, or why every adult seemed to possess an unusually detailed understanding of tactics and logistics. As the commemoration ceremony continued and speeches praised the wisdom of peace, Taeho listened with genuine appreciation. He believed in every word he had spoken about the value of understanding and cooperation. The last 3,000 years had been some of the most rewarding in human history, filled with discoveries, friendships, and achievements that would have been impossible during the chaotic centuries of ancient warfare. But in the quiet depths of his mind, like his ancestors before him, Ambassador Taeho remembered that sometimes, no matter how patient you were or how well you understood your enemy, some problems required different tools entirely. The key was knowing when to use them, and, more importantly, when not to. The galaxy's longest peace continued, built on the foundation of humanity's greatest strength, their ability to choose. The first warning came through the deep space monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge. Automated sensors, designed to detect natural phenomena like supernovas and asteroid fields, suddenly screamed with readings that made no sense. Objects the size of moons were moving through space at impossible speeds, their energy signatures unlike anything in the galactic database. Senior technician Del Ho stared at his displays in the monitoring station orbiting Kepler 442, his coffee growing cold as the numbers continued to climb. "This can't be right," he muttered, running the scans again. The objects weren't just large. They were actively broadcasting on frequencies that should have torn apart any normal communication equipment. Within minutes, every major government in the galaxy received the same transmission. The signal burned through their communication networks like acid through paper, overriding security protocols that had protected classified channels for centuries. When the static cleared, the message was simple and terrifying. The being that appeared on screens across civilized space was unlike anything in the galactic records. Standing nearly 4 meters tall, its body was covered in what looked like living metal that shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. Multiple arms ended in claws that could have crushed a human skull, and its eyes burned with an inner fire that seemed to look directly through the camera into the soul of every viewer. "We are the Vorthon Empire," the creature announced, its voice carrying harmonics that made listening equipment vibrate. "We have observed your pathetic alliance for centuries from beyond the void. You have grown soft in your peace, weak in your cooperation. Submit to our dominion, or face extinction. You have 30 of your standard rotations to comply." The transmission ended, but the aftermath began immediately. Emergency sessions were called on every major world. The Galactic Council's chambers, which had been filled with celebration just days before, now buzzed with panicked activity as delegates tried to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Admiral Korth of the Rigel Defense Force was the first to speak the truth that everyone was thinking. Our scanners show at least 500 vessels in their advanced fleet alone. Each one is the size of our largest space stations. Their energy readings suggest weapons that could crack a planet's core with a single shot. The Zelthani representative, her crystalline body now flickering with the deep red hues of terror, raised a trembling appendage. Surely this is some kind of mistake. No species would announce their intentions like this unless they were completely confident in their ability to carry them out. As if summoned by her words, reports began flooding in from the outer colonies. 3 worlds in the Proxima system, peaceful agricultural colonies with populations in the millions, simply vanished from all sensor readings. Where there had once been thriving planets with cities and farms, there was now only empty space and slowly expanding clouds of cosmic dust. The first footage came from a cargo vessel that had been approaching Proxima 3 when the attack occurred. Captain Jinwoo's ship had been carrying supplies for the upcoming Harvest Festival when his sensors detected massive energy buildup in the system, recording everything. His voice crackled through the emergency transmission. Something's wrong. Hear the planet ... It's just gone. Not destroyed, not broken apart. Gone like it never existed. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever did this, it's not using any technology we understand. The recording showed the moment of destruction. A beam of pure energy, dark purple like a bruise against space, reached down from one of the massive Vorthon vessels and touched the planet's surface. In less than 10 seconds, an entire world with all its people, animals, plants, and history ceased to exist. Panic spread through the council chambers like wildfire. The Makari delegation immediately activated their species' ancient evacuation protocols, preparing to scatter their population across hidden colonies that had been established millennia ago as safeguards against extinction. The insectoid began chattering in their rapid-fire language, their usually coordinated movements becoming erratic with fear. "This is impossible," declared Councillor Vexter, his forearms gesticulating wildly. "No species develops that level of destructive capability without someone detecting them. Where did they come from? How did they remain hidden for so long?" Dr. Yuna from the Human Scientific Council had been analyzing the energy signatures from the destroyed worlds. Her face was pale as she delivered her report. "Based on the readings, these weapons operate on principles we don't even have theories for. They're not just destroying matter, they're somehow erasing it from existence entirely. The energy required for this should be impossible to generate, let alone control." The room fell silent except for the soft weeping of several delegates. 3,000 years of peace had left the galaxy unprepared for this level of threat. Their combined military forces were designed for peacekeeping and disaster relief, not warfare against an enemy that could erase planets with casual ease. Admiral Korth stood slowly, his aged face bearing the weight of terrible realization. Our defense fleets are ceremonial at best. We have patrol ships, rescue vessels, and exploration craft. We haven't built a true warship in over 2 millennia. Most of our military academies teach conflict resolution and humanitarian aid. We don't even remember how to fight a real war. The Goliath representative, a being of living stone whose species was known for their strength and resilience, spoke in a voice like grinding boulders. "My people survived the asteroid bombardments that destroyed our original homeworld. We have faced extinction before, but this is beyond anything we have ever encountered. How do you fight an enemy that can simply erase you from existence?" As the discussions continued and panic spread, all eyes gradually turned to the human delegation table. Throughout the crisis, Ambassador Tejo had remained remarkably calm, his hands folded peacefully before him as he listened to the reports and debates. His 5 companions sat equally still, their faces showing concern but not the terror that gripped most other species. "Ambassador Tejo," Councillor Vextar said, his voice carrying a note of desperate hope, "your species has experience with warfare that none of us possess. Surely you must have some insight into how we might face this threat." Tejo was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to look beyond the chambers to something only he could see. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the same calm diplomacy it always had, but underneath there was something else. Something that hadn't been there during 3,000 years of peaceful negotiations. "The Vorthon have made a tactical error," he said simply. "They've announced their intentions and given us time to prepare. In ancient human military doctrine we called this showing your hand. It suggests either supreme confidence or significant inexperience with organized resistance. Dr. Minho, seated beside Taeho, nodded slowly. Our historical analysis of similar situations shows that overwhelming initial displays of force are often used to avoid actual prolonged conflict. They want us to surrender without fighting. But what choice do we have? Pressed Admiral Quoth. They've demonstrated they can destroy entire worlds. Even if we wanted to resist, we lack the means to do so effectively. Taeho's smile was the same diplomatic expression he'd worn for decades, but something in his eyes had shifted. It was subtle, like the first hint of steel showing through well-worn velvet, but those who looked closely could see it, an ancient patience that had been waiting quietly for 3 millennia. What will humanity do? Counselor Vexter asked directly. His compound eyes fixed on the human ambassador. Tae-Ho stood slowly, his movements still carrying the measured grace of a career diplomat. Around him, his companions also rose, their postures shifting almost imperceptibly from the relaxed stance of peacekeepers to something else entirely. We'll need to make some preparations, Taeho replied, his voice carrying the same calm tone that had resolved countless disputes over the centuries. Please excuse us while we make some necessary communications with our home territories. As the human delegation filed out of the chambers, none of the other species noticed the way they moved. Their steps were still quiet and respectful, but now they carried a rhythm that spoke of purpose and precision. The galaxy's premier diplomats were about to remind everyone why their ancestors had been so thoroughly documented in those carefully maintained historical archives. The 30-day countdown had begun, but the Vorthan Empire was about to discover that some species' definition of preparation was very different from others. The first sign that something had changed came from the human colonies themselves. While panic spread through the galaxy like wildfire, human settlements displayed a reaction that chilled their alien neighbors to the bone. They smiled, not the warm, diplomatic smiles that had become humanity's trademark over 3 millennia of peace. These were different, predatory, ancient, the kind of expressions that made even the bravest alien species take an unconscious step backward. At the Galactic University on Centauri Prime, Professor Kellner watched in growing confusion as his human students began receiving messages from home. One by one, they packed their belongings with swift efficiency and departed without explanation. The usually chatty humans had become eerily quiet, their movements precise and purposeful. Eun-G was among the first to leave. Her message from New Busan had been simple. Time to come home, little star. The family's getting together. But there was something in those words that made her blood sing with recognition. Something that had been sleeping in her genes for 3,000 years was finally waking up. I don't understand, Professor Kellner said as she gathered her xenobiology research. The Vorthan threat affects everyone. Surely your studies are more important now than ever. Yunji paused in her packing, and when she looked at him, the elderly Vidani professor saw something in her eyes that made his bark-like skin shiver. My real education is about to begin, Professor. Thank you for everything you taught me about understanding different species. That knowledge will be very useful. The way she said useful made it sound less like academic curiosity and more like tactical intelligence. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the massive trade station Nexus Prime, Captain Unesio's merchant fleet had been scheduled to deliver agricultural supplies to 7 different systems. Instead, she began issuing recall orders to every human vessel under her command. Her Zelthani business partner Velta floated anxiously in her office, his translucent form flickering with worry. Unesio, this makes no sense. The colonies need these supplies more than ever now. People are panicking, hoarding resources. Your fleet could make enormous profits. Unesio looked up from her command console, and Velta saw that same unsettling smile that was appearing on human faces everywhere. Old obligations are calling, my friend. Some things are more important than profit. What obligations? You're a merchant captain, not a soldier, am I? Unesio's fingers danced across her controls with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times before. Funny thing about humans, Velta, we tend to be good at more than one thing. As her ships began changing course, heading back toward human space with movements that seemed far too coordinated for a simple merchant fleet, Velta realized he might never have truly known his business partner at all. But the most disturbing changes were happening in human settlements themselves. Facilities that had served as tourist attractions for centuries suddenly came alive with activity. The Memorial Museum of Ancient Earth on Luna, which housed replicas of historical weapons and battle gear, began drawing massive power from the colony's main grid. The curator, Dr. Soyoung, had spent 40 years giving tours to schoolchildren and alien visitors, explaining how humanity had evolved beyond such primitive tools. Now she stood before displays that were no longer replicas, watching as preservation fields deactivated and revealing the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. Maintenance cycle complete, announced the facility's AI in a voice that sounded far more military than anyone remembered. All systems operational, awaiting authorization codes. Dr. Soyoung's fingers moved across a control panel that most visitors had assumed was decorative. The authorization codes came to her as naturally as breathing, muscle memory from training she had supposedly never received. On the agricultural world of New Seoul, what had appeared to be a simple farming collective began revealing its true nature. Underground facilities that sensors had read as root cellars and storage silos opened to reveal manufacturing bays that could have produced enough equipment to outfit an army. Farmer Dong Hyeon wiped soil from his hands and activated systems that had been waiting patiently for 3 millennia. Around him, his neighbors did the same, their movements coordinated with the precision of a military unit that had drilled together for years. Harvest seasons come early this year, he said to his wife Ji-won, who was already pulling on a uniform that definitely hadn't come from any agricultural supply catalog. The galaxy's intelligence networks, such as they were after 3,000 years of peace, began picking up fragments of human communications. What they heard made no sense to species who had known humans only as diplomats and farmers. Code phrases that sounded like family conversations but carried multiple layers of meaning. Technical specifications disguised as recipes. Tactical discussions, hidden within cultural exchange programs. At the Galactic Council, the other species watched with growing alarm as human representatives excused themselves from session after session. Ambassador Taeho remained, but even he seemed different. The diplomatic mask was still there, but something ancient and patient showed through the cracks. Ambassador, Councillor Vextar pressed during an emergency session, our intelligence services are reporting unusual activity throughout human space. Power surges in unexpected locations, massive population movements, communications traffic that our linguists can't properly decode. What exactly are your people preparing for? Taeho's smile was polite, diplomatic, and absolutely terrifying. We're dusting off some old family traditions, Counselor, things that have been passed down through generations, kept alive in stories and songs and other activities. What kind of traditions? The useful kind. Dr. Hyenwoo's resignation from the Galactic Mediation Council sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community. For 50 years, he had been the galaxy's premier expert on peaceful conflict resolution. His techniques had prevented wars, resolved trade disputes, and brought peace to species that had been enemies for millennia. His replacement message was brief and chilling: returning to my previous area of expertise. My skills will be needed elsewhere. When pressed about what his previous expertise might have been, no one could find any records. His official biography showed decades of peaceful service, education in psychology and diplomacy, awards for humanitarian efforts. But now that they looked closer, there were gaps. Periods of time that were listed simply as advanced studies or special training with no details provided. Similar gaps appeared in the records of humans throughout the galaxy. Farmers who had somehow acquired expertise in logistics and supply chain management, teachers who demonstrated unexpected knowledge of psychology and crowd control, artists whose work showed an unusual understanding of structural engineering and defensive architecture. The Whispers, beings of pure energy who could detect thoughts and emotions, began reporting something that frightened them more than the Vorth threat itself. The humans weren't panicking or despairing like other species. Instead, their emotional signatures showed something the galaxy hadn't seen from humanity in 3,000 years. Anticipation, excitement, the cold satisfaction of a hunter that had been patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Captain Ginwoo, whose cargo vessel had witnessed the destruction of the Proxima colonies, received new orders that made him check his communications equipment twice. Instead of fleeing to safer systems, he was being directed to establish observation posts at strategic points throughout the Outer Rim. Are you certain about these coordinates? He asked during his encrypted communication with Human Command. These positions will put us directly in the path of any advancing Vorthan forces. The response came in a voice he hadn't heard in decades, but recognized immediately. Confirmed, Captain. Time to remember what we learned in the deep patrol exercises. Your ship has capabilities you haven't used in a long time. We're going to need eyes and ears where the enemy least expects them. as Jinwoo began modifying his supposedly peaceful cargo vessel, revealing hidden sensor arrays and communication equipment that definitely hadn't been in the original blueprints. He found himself whistling an old tune his grandfather had taught him, a song about hunters in the dark waiting for prey that thought itself the predator. Throughout human space, similar preparations were underway. 3,000 years of careful planning, patient maintenance, and hidden readiness were finally being revealed. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest deception hadn't been pretending to be peaceful, it had been pretending that peace had made them weak. The transformation began at exactly 0600 Galactic Standard Time, 25 days before the Vorthan deadline. Across the galaxy, alien intelligence officers watched their monitoring screens in disbelief as human colonies suddenly blazed with energy signatures that shouldn't exist. On Luna, the Memorial Museum of Ancient Earth had always been a popular tourist destination. Families would bring their children to see the quaint displays of primitive human weapons, laughing at the crude projectile firearms and chemical explosives that represented humanity's barbaric past. The museum's elderly curator, Dr. So Young, had given the same gentle speech thousands of times about how her species had evolved beyond such violent tools. Now, as alien surveillance satellites watched in shock, the museum's roof split open like a flower blooming in fast forward. What emerged wasn't a relic of the past, but a weapon platform that made modern galactic defense systems look like children's toys. Massive energy cannons rose from hidden chambers, their surfaces gleaming with technology that seemed to bend light around them. Dr. Soyoung stood in the museum's command center, her gray hair pulled back in a military bun, her tourist clothing replaced by a uniform that fit her like a second skin. The displays around her showed tactical information that would have taken most species years to understand, but her fingers danced across the controls with practiced ease. Luna, defense grid online, she reported to someone off-screen. All weapons systems operational. Energy reserves at maximum capacity. We're ready for whatever comes next. Similar scenes played out across human space. The agricultural research facility on New Busan had been Sang-woo's second home for 30 years. He'd spent countless hours there, supposedly developing new hydroponic techniques and crop rotation strategies. Now, as he walked through its familiar corridors, blast doors slid open to reveal chambers that had nothing to do with farming. Commander Bora was waiting for him in what had once appeared to be a seed storage room. Her worn farmer's overalls had been replaced by a crisp military uniform decorated with medals that suggested a career far more complex than anyone had imagined. The walls around them displayed holographic tactical maps of the entire galaxy, with red markers indicating Vorthan fleet positions and blue ones showing human assets that nobody had known existed. "Welcome back, Colonel," she said, using a rank that didn't appear in any of Sang-woo's public records. "Ready to remember what we do best?" Sang-woo smiled, the expression carrying none of the gentle patience he'd shown while tending his gardens. "It's been a long time, Commander, but some things you never really forget, do you?" Around them, equipment hummed to life that belonged in a strategic command center, not a farming community. Holographic displays showed supply lines, troop movements, and manufacturing schedules for weapons that the galaxy's scientists would have claimed were theoretically impossible. The most shocking revelations came from Earth's orbital platforms. For 3,000 years, alien visitors had marveled at the beautiful space stations that served as cultural centers and scientific research facilities. The Harmony Station hosted art exhibitions from across the galaxy. The Unity platform was famous for its diplomatic conferences and peace negotiations. Now, those same platforms began extending weapon arrays that dwarfed anything in the current galactic arsenal. Particle cannons capable of cutting through a moon emerged from what tourists had thought were decorative sculptures. Shield generators that could protect entire solar systems powered up for the first time in millennia. Captain Eugen watched from the bridge of what had been registered as a civilian research vessel. The peaceful explorer had spent decades cataloging star systems and conducting scientific surveys. Now, as its true capabilities came online, she found herself commanding a warship that could have single-handedly defeated the combined fleets of most galactic powers. "All systems green," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Wushek, whose previous job had supposedly been analyzing soil samples. "Weapons fully charged, stealth systems operational, fighter bays ready for launch." "Fighter bays?" Yu raised an eyebrow. "I thought we were just carrying survey drones." Wushik grinned. "Funny thing about those survey drones, Captain. Turns out they're remarkably well armed for peaceful exploration equipment." The transformation wasn't limited to military hardware. Across human colonies, people who had spent decades in peaceful professions revealed skills that made their alien neighbors question everything they thought they knew about humanity. Professor Minsu, who had taught xenobiology at the University of Kepler for 40 years, calmly activated systems that turned his research lab into a strategic intelligence center. His students had always wondered why he knew so much about alien physiology and psychology, chalking it up to academic curiosity. Now they understood that his knowledge went far deeper than textbook learning. Artist Haywon, whose sculptures had graced peace monuments throughout the galaxy, revealed that her understanding of structural engineering and materials science came from years of designing defensive fortifications. Her beautiful artwork had always incorporated principles that could be adapted for more practical purposes. Even the children seemed different. 12-year-old Genesio, who had won galaxy-wide science fairs with his projects on peaceful energy generation, casually mentioned to his alien classmates that the same principles could be used to build weapons that would make the Vorthon fleet look like toys. The most disturbing revelation came when Yunji arrived on New Busan. The agricultural colony she had grown up on was gone, replaced by something that looked like a fortress disguised as a farm, hidden beneath the familiar domes where she had played as a child. Manufacturing facilities worked around the clock, producing equipment that seemed to violate several laws of physics. You see, Little Star Sangwoo explained as they stood on an observation deck watching the first human warships emerge from concealed shipyards that had been hidden beneath wheat fields. We didn't evolve beyond war, we just got so good at it that peace became more interesting. The ships rising from New Bison's surface were unlike anything in the current galactic fleet. They moved with a grace that suggested artificial gravity control beyond current understanding, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon ports were barely visible until they opened, revealing energy cannons that hummed with barely contained power. How long? Yunji asked, her voice filled with wonder and something that might have been pride. How long have you been planning this? Since the day we joined the Galactic Council, her father replied. We meant every word about preferring peace to war. But we also remembered that the best way to ensure peace is to be absolutely certain you can win any war that someone else starts. Around them, the transformation continued. Farmers revealed themselves as logistics specialists. Teachers became intelligence analysts. Doctors demonstrated that their knowledge of alien physiology could be applied to far more than healing. The galaxy's spy networks, what few existed after 3 millennia of peace, began reporting impossible things. Human colonies that had been surveyed hundreds of times were revealing hidden capabilities that should have been detected decades ago. Peaceful freighters were transforming into warships. Cultural exchange students were displaying knowledge that suggested intelligence training. Most disturbing of all were the humans themselves. The gentle diplomatic species that the galaxy had trusted for 3,000 years was revealing an underlying competence in warfare that made their ancient historical records seem conservative by comparison. Dr. Hyenwoo, who had resigned from the Galactic Mediation Council, appeared in a new role that explained his sudden departure. Standing in what looked like a military command center hidden beneath Geneva's Peace Memorial, he coordinated operations across dozens of star systems, with the casual efficiency of someone who had been doing it his entire life. Phase 1 complete, he reported to unseen commanders. All assets activated, all personnel in position. The galaxy now understands that we were never as harmless as we seemed. As the 25th day dawned and the Vorthon deadline drew closer, one thing had become clear to every intelligence service in the galaxy. They had never truly known humanity at all. The species they had trusted as mediators and peacekeepers had spent 3,000 years preparing for exactly this moment. The Vorthon Empire was about to discover that some species' definition of readiness was very different from what they expected. The Vorthon Armada arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system with the confidence of predators, approaching helpless prey. Their massive ships, each one a floating city of destruction, moved in perfect formation through space. War Commander Vekvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Fist, watching the primitive solar system through sensors that could detect the smallest asteroid. Scan results complete. War Commander reported his tactical officer, detecting significant energy signatures throughout the system, far more than expected for a peaceful species. Vekvar's metallic features twisted into what passed for a smile among his people. Desperate last-minute preparations. How pathetic. These humans spent 3,000 years playing at peace, and now they think they can build a defense in 30 days. But as the Vorthen fleet moved deeper into the solar system, something began to feel wrong. The energy signatures weren't chaotic or desperate like the hasty defenses of a panicking species. They were organized, coordinated, and far more powerful than anything the Vorthens had encountered before. War Commander, the sensor officer's voice, carried a note of confusion. I'm detecting weapon signatures that don't match our databases. Some of these energy readings are beyond our theoretical maxims. Impossible, Vekvar growled. No peaceful species could develop such capabilities in a mere 30 days. That's when the human fleet revealed itself. What emerged from the space around Earth and its moon wasn't the handful of converted civilian ships the Vorthons expected. Hundreds of vessels materialized from what had seemed like empty space, their stealth systems deactivating in perfect synchronization. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering that made Vorthen technology look primitive by comparison. The flagship of the human fleet was a massive dreadnought, called the Peaceful Resolution. Its name would have been ironic if anyone had missed the point of what was about to happen. Commander Bora stood on its bridge, watching tactical displays that showed every Vorthen ship, every weapon, every possible escape route. All ships report ready, Commander, announced her tactical officer, Captain Dongwu. Vorthen fleet is in optimal engagement position. Biora's smile was gentle, almost maternal. Remember, everyone, disable, don't destroy. We're teachers, not executioners. Let's show them how it's done. The battle that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes and 32 seconds. The Vorthens opened fire first, their planet-cracking weapons reaching out toward the human fleet with energy that could have turned moons to dust. But the beams simply stopped, absorbed by shield technology that operated on principles the Vorthens couldn't comprehend. Impossible, Vekvar roared. Nothing can stop our primary weapons. War Commander, his tactical officer's voice was barely a whisper. The humans are returning fire. What came back wasn't the crude energy blasts or projectile weapons the Vorthens expected. Human weapons seemed to reach through space itself, bypassing shields and armor to disable critical systems with surgical precision. One by one, Vorthen ships found their engines dead, their weapons offline, their life support functioning but their ability to fight completely neutralized. The humans moved like dancers through space, their ships coordinating with an efficiency that spoke of centuries of practice. They anticipated every Vorthen tactic, countered every strategy, and responded to threats before the Vorthens could even deploy them. Captain Jinwu, commanding the vessel that had once been a simple cargo ship, found himself leading a squadron of fighters that the Vorthens couldn't even target properly. This is almost unfair, he commented to his wingman. They're fighting like it's still the old days, all brute force and overwhelming firepower. Well, replied Lieutenant Hyde, we did have 3,000 years to think about better ways to do this. On the Vorthen flagship, panic was setting in. War Commander Vekvar watched in horror as his seemingly invincible fleet was systematically disabled by opponents who treated the battle like a training exercise. How are they doing this? He demanded. Our intelligence said they were farmers, and diplomats. His communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Commander Bora's image appeared on the Vorthen's main screen. She looked exactly like what she was, a middle-aged woman who had spent decades growing crops and raising children. But her eyes held depths that spoke of knowledge and experience that went far beyond agriculture. War Commander Vekvar, she said politely, your fleet is disabled. Your weapons are offline. Your ability to harm anyone in this system has been neutralized. I suggest you stand down before someone gets hurt. This is impossible, Vekvar snarled. You're supposed to be peaceful. Weak Biora's smile was patient, almost pitying. We are peaceful. That's why we're not destroying your ships. A warlike species would have turned your fleet into scrap metal by now. We're giving you the chance to surrender with dignity. But Vekvar's pride wouldn't allow surrender. He activated his ship's final weapon, a device that could destabilize a star's core. If he couldn't conquer this system, he would destroy it entirely. The weapon fired exactly once before human countermeasures disabled it. The energy beam that should have reached Earth's sun was absorbed by technology that the Vorthens couldn't even detect, let alone understand. Now you're just being rude, Commander Bora said with the tone of a teacher correcting a misbehaving student. Captain Dongwu, please remove the War Commander's ability to endanger anyone else. What followed was a demonstration of precision that left the Vorthons speechless. Every weapon system on their flagship was disabled in a matter of seconds, leaving them floating helplessly in space but completely unharmed. The aftermath was even more shocking than the battle itself. Human rescue ships arrived within minutes, their medical bays fully equipped to treat Vorthon physiology. The same people who had just disabled an entire invasion fleet now worked to save the lives of their enemies. Dr. Yuna, who had spent decades as a peaceful researcher, treated Vorthon wounded with the same gentle efficiency she had once shown to injured farm animals. Her hands, which had just helped coordinate a military victory, now worked to heal rather than harm. "I don't understand," gasped one injured Vorthon soldier as she tended to his wounds. "Why are you helping us? We came to destroy you." Dr. Yu smiled the same warm smile she had always worn. "Because that's what healers do. The fighting is over. Now comes the more important work of making sure everyone goes home safely." Back on the Galactic Council station, Admiral Korth watched the battle reports with an expression of complete bewilderment. Where did all this come from? The ships, the weapons, the tactics, none of this should exist. Ambassador Tejo, who had remained at the council throughout the crisis, finally allowed his diplomatic mask to drop completely. What the galaxy saw underneath was still recognizably human, but there was an ancient patience there that spoke of depths they had never imagined. 3,000 years of peace wasn't our retirement from war, Admiral, he explained with the same gentle tone he had used in countless negotiations. It was our vacation from it. We've been ready for this moment since the day we joined your council. The Vorthon War Commander, recovering in a human medical facility, found himself face to face with Dr. Hyan Wu, the former conflict resolution specialist who now wore the uniform of a strategic defense coordinator. "We withdraw our ultimatum," Dekvar said quietly, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. We didn't know." Hyan Wu nodded politely, his manner as courteous as it had been during 3,000 years of peaceful negotiations. "Few species do. We've found that most problems can be solved through proper communication and understanding, but some problems," he gestured toward the disabled Vorthon fleet, visible through the medical bay's windows. "Some problems require different tools." As news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy, species that had known humans for millennia found themselves questioning everything they thought they understood. The gentle farmers and patient diplomats were still there, but now everyone could see the steel beneath the silk. On Yubu-san, Yunji stood beside her father watching the stars, their conversation carrying the same warmth it always had. "Will we go back to being farmers and teachers now?" she asked. Sungu smiled, the expression carrying all the paternal love it always had, but now touched with pride in what they had accomplished. "Of course, little star. War was never our purpose. It was just something we happened to be exceptionally good at. Peace is much more challenging, much more interesting." The Galactic Council would eventually understand that humanity's greatest strength had never been their capacity for violence, but their ability to choose when to use it. The galaxy's peaceful humans had never been pacifists, they were apex predators who had found the game of peace more intellectually stimulating than the game of war, until someone had been foolish enough to remind them why they had become so exceptionally good at both. The end.